Greetings, everyone. Reflecting on week 3, I want to thank you for your success in creating a culture in your class in which um, people feel comfortable sharing um, stories that are illustrative of the issues that we're discussing. You're very supportive of one another, and I appreciate everyone who has shared stories. That takes courage, and I appreciate everyone who is supportive of those sharing stories, because stories, of course, are the best teachers. With regard to racial profiling, it's clear from your lived experience how common it is and how damaging it is, and also how invisible it is if you happen to have the privilege of wearing a white suit. Um, so clearly, being marginalized and oppressed in that way, not to mention all the other microaggressions and macroaggressions that people experience, being marginalized that way, experiencing that emotional violence, clearly it is a huge risk factor for adolescents, for a person of any age, but particularly for adolescents who are such a tender developmental age where they're in the process of identity formation, and uh, developing their sense of whether they are worthwhile or not. Um, so clearly, racial profiling constitutes a major risk factor. I want to draw your attention at the same time to the fact that there are many potential and current protective factors that can offset the negative impact of risk factors. One thing that's important to understand is that there is a lot of research supporting the fact that most children who grow up in adverse life circumstances have positive outcomes. And one of the things that all of those children have in common um, is the presence of at least one person who believes in them, supports them, and sticks with them as they move through their own development. Clearly, your case files feature risk factors and negative outcomes. So it's particularly important that you have a resilience lens or perspective that allows you to recognize how powerful protective factors are, and to recognize that risk factors are continuously changing, and at any point, risk factors can be mitigated and protective factors can be potentiated. But of course, first they have to be identified in collaboration with your client. And the way that I'm suggesting that you do that is by making a chart of risk and protective factors, as I've shown you, and naming those at multiple systemic levels. You talked eloquently about white privilege. One of the most insidious aspects of white privilege is obliviousness. Obliviousness to the fact of one's own privilege, and obliviousness to the suffering of others, obliviousness to the negative consequences of privilege. And so those of us who are walking around in a little white suit, who enjoy privilege, have the responsibility to humble ourselves and get woke by educating ourselves and then becoming allies. We have two national political figures who have just blown it in that regard. The governor of Virginia, Northam, somehow made the idiotic decision to post on his yearbook page, as he was graduating from medical school, a photograph of two people, one in blackface and the other in a Ku Klux Klan outfit. And when that was brought to light, he just seemed clueless. And it seems pretty obvious that he could have moved through that much more gracefully by humbling himself, educating himself, and becoming an ally. Elizabeth Warren is another case in point, as she claimed Cherokee heritage, joining the legions of white people that claim Cherokee great-grandmother or whatever. And then trying to support that idea by saying, well, that was my family story. And then by having a blood test and indicating that because of a certain blood quantum that she actually did have right to claim Cherokee heritage. I don't know, but it's pretty obvious that she could have and should have humbled herself and educated herself and declared that she was now going to be an active ally and a continuous learner. Oh my goodness. So anyway, I very much appreciate your conversation and the culture that you have created and your generosity in sharing your illustrative stories. Well done.